for anyone who has questions, we're going to hear from our different advocates on different issues. And so if you have questions, please drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. And when we're finished with the presentations, we'll go through the questions. So hopefully this will be very, very helpful. So I'm going to get to Anne. I'm not certain. I think Lou might have just gotten, I don't know what happened. So
Terry, he sent in the chat that he's here, but I'm not sure if he can hear us. So
oh, he's now only a participant for some reason. Okay.
Okay. So I'm happy to.
Let me try and get him.
Oh, he said he got bumped off. So.
Nice. Right. Okay. I think I just put him in as a panelist. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. There's Lou. All right. Go back to. All right. Louis Rosado Birch. He is the Connecticut Director for the Citizens Campaign for the Environment. And since 2011, Lou has represented CCC on a range of conservation and sustainability issues, including modernizing Connecticut's bottle bill, reducing solid waste, fighting plastic ocean pollution, and working to tackle the climate change crisis. He serves on the Connecticut Recyclers Coalition Board and is an active member of the Connecticut State Water Plan Implementation Work Group and sits on the Long Island Sound Advisory with U.S. Senator Chris Murphy. So Lou, I am gonna stop my share and you can take over.
Righty. Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. So just wanted to start off by saying thank you, Terry, and thank you to all of your members for inviting us to talk today. Lots to talk about, so I guess I'll just kind of dive into it. I'm going to focus primarily today on solid waste and recycling issues. There's been a lot going on around the state recently on reducing waste and increasing recycling. In particular, with a renewed sense of urgency because of the recent news that the Mira trash to energy plant in Hartford will be retiring by July of 2022. And this facility manages about a third of the state's solid waste. And so previously, the state had adopted a solid waste reduction goal of reducing our waste or diverting 60% of our waste by the year 2024. And so we are about halfway through that time period, and our recycling rate is only at about 30% at best. And so we've got a long way to go in terms of, we had a long way to go before we found out that Mira was going to be closing down. And now, it's that much more urgent that we identify workable solid waste reduction and recycling solutions. Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has been engaged with municipalities through the CCSMM process. That's the Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. And they've worked to identify several solutions at the state and local levels. Encourage folks to look at the CCSMM webpage. And the report that they've put out has a number of recommendations that your municipalities can take, as well as that legislators can take this year. So I encourage folks to look at that, share that with your CEOs, and also reach out to your legislators about some of the initiatives that I'm going to be talking about in just a few minutes. So some of those statewide actions that they've recommended through the CCSMM process included promoting and expanding curbside food waste composting and collection, exploring unit-based pricing solutions, previously known as pay-as-you-throw. We could talk about that as well, and implementing EPR solutions for hard-to-recycle items, which there are a number of, and I'll get into that as well. And so there are a few Environment Committee bills that have been introduced so far this legislative session that address some of those issues. The process is moving a little bit more slowly than what it has in the past, due in part to the fact that everything is taking place online and much of the committee meetings and session dates have been, all done virtually. And so that's kind of slowed things down a little bit. I think the committees have made an effort to kind of prioritize some of the initiatives that they're going to take up this year, understanding that they're going to have limited time due to issues related to the pandemic. So a couple of highlights that I want to just share with folks. House Bill 6386 is an EPR bill. It would establish an extended producer responsibility program for propane gas cylinders, but it actually only sets up a study to evaluate opportunities, EPR opportunities on smoke detectors and waste tires. And so and it establishes a tire hauler's license for scrap tires. We've been recommending that they make changes to this bill, strengthen it to establish full-scale EPR programs for all three of these waste products. For one, and I recognize that I'm just kind of assuming folks understand what EPR is. This is what we refer to as extended producer responsibility. Essentially, this is making manufacturers responsible for their fair share of the cost in recycling these waste products. In other words, many of them profit very handsomely from these products and services, and given that municipalities have really struggled in recent years with the cost of managing various different types of waste, we feel that it makes a lot of sense, particularly for items such as, the propane gas cylinders. Folks may know that there have been a number of explosions recently because folks will throw those cylinders typically made out of metal. So a lot of times consumers just assume that they can go in the blue bin. What happens is those cylinders end up in municipal recycling infrastructure. They are pressurized, and so there have been a few disasters at MRF material recovery facilities recently where those canisters actually explode. And so these are the type of things. Smoke detectors as well. Current recycling system for smoke detectors, very onerous, require consumers to mail those smoke detectors back to the manufacturer, and they have to be mailed in a very specific way, otherwise the manufacturer won't accept it. And so we think that these are clear examples of waste products that could easily and more readily be recycled given an EPR strategy for those different types of products. We've also been advocating for EPR solutions for recycling consumer packaging, but we did not get a bill on that this year, and so we'll be back on that issue next year. Another bill that I'd like to point out would be House Bill 6502. This is another catch-all bill that would phase out polystyrene or styrofoam food service packaging, that would establish a soft ban on single-use plastic straws, prohibit the intentional release of helium balloons, and establish a study to look at the safety of so-called compostable produce bags. And so just a brief word or two on those issues. There's been efforts in the past to phase out polystyrene food containers as well as lunch trays at school buildings and institutions of higher learning. Both of those are included there. We think this makes a lot of sense. Currently, the state of Connecticut has a prohibition on intentionally releasing 10 or more helium balloons for celebrations and birthday parties, things like that. Those balloons, obviously, once they go up into the atmosphere, they come down somewhere, and those type of materials do contribute to the plastic ocean pollution problem that we have. And the soft ban on single-use straws, just to clarify, simply states that that food service establishments may continue to keep single-use plastic straws on hand, but that those straws would need to be requested specifically by a patron and not just given out automatically. And so we think that that makes sense as well. Encourage folks to contact their legislators and voice their support for those bills. One final thing I'd like to put on folks' radar is a bill that was raised as a concept, but that has not yet been drafted. And we expect we will see some language and hopefully a bill number soon. And that would be an act concerning solid waste management in our state. That bill is expected to include language expanding Connecticut's bottle bill, expanding the food waste ban. So currently any restaurant or food service establishment that produces more than a ton of food waste per week and is within a 20-mile radius of a composting facility is required by law to divert that waste, whether it be through donating it or through sending it to be composted. We would like to see that threshold come down and that service area expanded from 20 miles to apply to, and as well as to apply to hospitals and schools and other types of large generators of food waste. It will also likely can include some language regarding the unit-based pricing model, which we suspect will establish a pilot program for pay-as-you-throw in Connecticut that can then be expanded upon at a later date. I will kind of wrap up there and happy to take any questions that folks have on any of those items. Or I can wait until a little bit later in the program, if that makes more sense.
Yes, I don't know my back. We're going to do all the presentations and then people can put questions in the chat and the Q&A.
Sounds good.
But thank you, Lou. That was a lot of information. So that was really great. And that is what we need. So I am going to get back to my little screen and I'll introduce Anne Hulick. There we go, Anne. Anne is our next speaker. She is the director of Clean Water Action here in Connecticut and coordinates the Coalition for a Safe and Healthy Connecticut to pass health protective policies in Connecticut aimed at removing toxic chemicals from consumer and children's products. And she works to raise awareness across the state on the health impacts of exposure to toxic chemicals. Anne was a staff nurse in critical care and cardiothoracic surgical intensive care. She served as director of acute care services at Waterbury Hospital Health Center and as the nursing director of the medical cardiology service at Hartford Hospital. Anne's passion to combine nursing, health policy, and environmental law led her to pursue a law degree from Western New England College School of Law, and she was admitted to the Connecticut Bar in October 2007. Prior to joining Clean Water Action, Anne worked as an environmental analyst in the Air Bureau at Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection and was the environmental health coordinator at Connecticut Nurses Association. She has written and lectured extensively on environmental health topics, particularly on the health impacts associated with exposure to chemicals. Welcome, Anne. Thank you, Lou, and welcome, Anne.
Thank you, Terry. I thought I told you to skip all that.
You know, get all the, I swear every time I learn you're a lawyer, I'm like, oh, that's right, she's a lawyer. Very
Yeah,
impressive.
lawyer and a nurse.
Very impressive.
So, yeah, and it's always tough to follow my dear friend Lou because he does such amazing work, and I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to speak with my esteemed colleagues tonight. So thank you, Terry, for the opportunity. And I'm just gonna make sure I am sharing my screen. I have a couple slides, but it just helps me, frankly, to talk through what I wanted to share with you. So again, thank you all for the opportunity. So Clean Water Action focuses on a number of issues, and we're certainly supporting all the bills that my colleagues are working on that we'll present to you tonight. But what I thought I would do is focus on some of our top priorities, which are toxic chemicals that impact our health and our environment. And that is primarily PFAS chemicals, which you may have heard of, but I'll go through those really quickly and show why we are concerned about those and what legislative proposals we are taking that we hope we can get all of your support on. And again, thank you to my colleagues, Lou and others, because you're part of our coalition and you're helping us. So let me go to, hopefully I can go to the next slide. Okay, so just very, very briefly, if you don't know what are PFAS, this is an acronym for I'm saying it slow because it's per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And what those are a class of chemicals. There's now about 9,000 different variations of these chemicals. And they all have a common characteristic in that they have a fluorine and carbon bond. And for those of you that aren't chemists like me, what I've learned is that fluorine carbon bond is the strongest bond known to man. And they are very effective in many, many, many products. But they also, we have learned over the last 30, 40 years, because of that bond, they are destructive to our environment, and they also have very significant health impacts. So this slide shows you just in general, the range of health impacts that are very strongly linked to exposure to PFAS chemicals. And you will frequently hear about two, PFOA and PFOS, that were the original two variations that were the most commonly studied initially. But again, since that time, the chemical industry has created many more variations. And as we're studying more and more, they all seem to be contributing and linked to these very serious health impacts. So cancers, liver disease, hormone changes, even an impaired response to vaccines. There's some recent research that impaired immunity is contributing to higher incidence of COVID. So these are really very, very toxic chemicals. And the concern is that because that bond is so strong, they do not break down in the environment. And they're used in a whole host of products. And so once those products get into our environment, they stay there for, it's estimated, thousands of years. They're all across the globe. And they're not only found in humans, in wildlife, in our water, but they are in our products that we continue to use that expose our, impact our health as humans, impact our environment, and contaminate our waters. So we've seen PFAS contamination throughout Connecticut. This is just a slide of a very couple of, a few of the areas of concern. We had a very big spill of firefighting foam, which contains PFAS, into the Farmington River in June of 2019. We know that there's PFAS from the Hartford landfill, likely from many other landfills across the state, including Ellington. We know that it's found near Groton, near the naval base. It was found in Norwalk, in their drinking water well source. And it was recently found in the Connecticut Water Company drinking water sources. Once we do testing, we know we're going to find more and more sources of PFAS because of the fact that we've been using these chemicals in products for the last 40 years or so. And they've contaminated our environment, and they don't break down, they don't go away. So as the more and more that we look for these chemicals and monitor these sources, we're going to find them. So according to an environmental working group study, we know that this is not only a global problem, but is a significant problem in the United States for our water sources. If you Google the Environmental Working Group, there's an interactive map which shows that PFAS has been found in 610 sites, 43 states. It's probably more than that right now, frankly. And there's estimated that 19 million people are at risk of exposure in their drinking water. And we've seen that in Connecticut. So what we're trying to do, and what many states are trying to do, is to turn off the tap of these PFAS chemicals so that we are eliminating from commerce every single product that they're used that is unnecessary and causes not only human health concerns, but environmental concerns. And frankly, this is a huge environmental justice concern. So we have two extremely important bills in the Connecticut legislature this session in the Environment Committee that we would love your support on. And the first one is Senate Bill 837, which is restricting firefighting foam. And firefighting foam, you see a picture. This is actually a picture on the screen of the spill in the Farmington River, which continues to contaminate fish and completely shut down any recreation and economic activity in that area. So firefighting foam is a major source of these toxic chemicals. We know there are fluorine-free foams available and used around the world. We are working with colleagues across the country, with firefighters and other officials to make sure that we are moving forward with restrictions on firefighting foam. And I'm really pleased that our Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, as well as our Department of Public Health, are very much, and our governor, frankly, are very much in support of these two bills, frankly, to restrict the uses of PFAS chemicals in these products. So SB 837 restricts firefighting foam in training. It restricts, it implements a take-back program so that our state is taking back this toxic foam from local fire departments, and then figuring out a safe and effective and environmentally friendly way of disposing this foam, which is yet to be determined. And then lastly, it is requiring an implementation of the use of fluorine-free foam, which is much less toxic to the environment and to human health. So that's a really, really important bill that will have multiple impacts to our health, to environment, to our water, and to environmental contamination for decades to come. Senate Bill 926 is another really important bill that I hope you all will support. And that is a bill to restrict PFAS chemicals in packaging. And PFAS chemicals are found in food packaging and things like pizza boxes and other sources of packaging, to restrict grease and water. And yet they're very, very toxic. Those chemicals leach into the food or whatever's in that container, And most of the time, as you all know, that packaging is single use. And what are we doing with it? We're putting it in our trash. We're trying to recycle it, but if it contains PFAS chemicals, it's actually not recyclable because it's toxic. So the scope of this bill is so important because, number one, we're restricting the use of these chemicals in packaging, so it's reducing exposure to public health. Two, it's a major environmental justice issue because many fast food restaurants, McDonald's, Burger King, others, who, unfortunately often are in color and low-income communities. So our environmental justice communities are impacted overwhelmingly by exposure to pollutants, and PFAS is just one more that they should not be exposed to from their food packaging. And then lastly, again, when we throw these packages out, all the packages that, pizza boxes, all of those things, they're going to our incinerator, to our landfills, and they are leaching out those chemicals into the environment, into air emissions, into our waters, and further contaminating our environment in Connecticut. So these two bills in particular, I wanted to raise your attention to tonight. They are extraordinarily important for health, for the environment, for our EJ communities, and they will have lasting impacts also to reduce waste so that we're reducing what we send to our landfills and our incinerators that are toxic. So I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the program. But again, Senate Bill 837 and Senate Bill 926, both in the Environment Committee. And I would love anyone's support, and we're happy to help. And I'll turn it back to you, Terry.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thanks. That was very, very helpful. And for those of you who remember, Anne worked so hard to get PFAS banned in firefighting foam. And then about a week after the legislative session ended in 2019, there was a huge spill, which really highlighted where we needed the ban. The spill was from that firefighting foam. So I will get back to my screen, and now I will introduce Anne Pratt. Anne currently serves as a director of organizing for Connecticut Citizen Action Group, a statewide membership organization committed to advancing issues of environmental justice, tax reform, stronger democracy, and racial and economic equity. Anne also serves as the executive director for the Connecticut Citizen Research Group. Previously, Anne served as the executive director of Progressive States Network, Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance, Connecticut Parent Power, and the Interfaith Coalition for Equity and Justice. Anne works with communities and institutional leaders to create innovative strategies for social and economic change related to strengthening economic democracy, building a more sustainable green economy, improving access to quality, affordable healthcare, and educational disparities. So welcome, Anne. It's nice to have you. And I will stop my share and turn it over to Anne.
All right, very good to be here. Thank you very much, Terry, for putting on this program. I greatly appreciate being a part of it. So thank you. Great. So as Terry said, I have an opportunity to work with a number of groups in the state. Today, my focus will be on some work that we are doing with a coalition of groups called Connecticut Renews, which is the state-based entity of a regional effort called Renew New England. And we have about 40 organizations across the state who are working together. The core mission of Connecticut Renews is to take this moment in time. Many of you have heard this narrative, overlapping crises of the global pandemic, systemic racism, massive unemployment, and the climate crisis, and using this moment to call for bold, strong initiatives to address so many of these crises. So I'm going to just share my screen. Hopefully it comes up as I, hold on one second. I just need to get that. Here we go. Okay, I think that's going to work. Here we go. Yes. So Connecticut Renews, committed to a more just, sustainable, and equitable Connecticut. And we have identified pillars that we are focused on. One is clean and renewable energy, helping to Connecticut get to its goals. Healthy and sustainable housing that I will be talking about in more depth in just a minute. We are also supportive and aligning with transportation initiatives across the state that are doing some great work on pushing common sense transportation options for the state, as well as frontline, low income, moderate communities. We're also working in conjunction with Lou and others about healthy communities, clean air and water. And we'll be partnering with Lou and others on that. We have initiated a food justice initiative. It's something new for us, still in development, but as many people know, given the current pandemic, that food justice has been lifted up as a really important priority for so many of us. And we also have access to healthcare, which runs through many of our initiatives. So that is Connecticut Renews. And I'm going to dig down deep into the healthy and sustainable housing, because we have come up with a proposal that creates a great deal of intersection between creating and meeting our zero carbon emissions, good jobs for particularly Black and Brown frontline communities, health and well-being, and economic development initiatives. So I'm now going to bring up another slide. Can you all see that? So I'm assuming you can. So this is just a brief summary of a piece of legislation that actually just had a public hearing today. We had some testimonies on this. Senate Bill 356, actually instituted by the co-chair of the Housing Committee, Senator Rick Lopes. An act establishing an energy efficiency retrofit grant program for affordable housing. This is also a piece of legislation that aligns and amplifies legislation that's also being advanced in Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. So there is definitely regional coordination on this initiative as well. Currently, the bill requires that there is the Department of Housing that establishes energy efficiency retrofit grant program. We actually suggested in the hearing today that DEEP and the Department of Social Services actually take on more of that. We'll keep you updated on how that goes, with the intent of maybe of getting more people who do energy efficiency programs engaged in this program. But basically the idea here is to incentivize in a very robust way retrofits that would include solar panels, heat pumps, weatherization initiatives with a target on low, moderate income neighborhoods and households. For way too long, so many of those households, communities, and individuals have actually not really benefited from a whole lot of energy efficiency programs. Oftentimes when you want to retrofit a home or weatherize a homes in an old building, in affordable, I mean, in low and moderate income communities, there's a lot of barriers to that, whether that's mold, ventilation issues, lead, all sorts of things that create barriers for you to actually do retrofits or weatherization. So a lot of this bill is focused on getting grants for remediation so that you actually can have that happen. And when you do that in a robust way and in a targeted way, and you have agencies working in collaboration to do that, the benefits are going to be huge. We believe that this is an initiative that obviously prioritizes equity and environmental justice. It also focuses on health and well-being by reducing the health impacts of all of the health instances in housing. I think the statistics are 30% of low and moderate income households have at least one or more health concerns in their homes, whether that's asbestos, mold, ventilation issues. This program targets that effort to begin remediation so that there also could be weatherization and energy efficiency retrofits put into existing homes. Through that, good jobs are created for people within communities. So that's also part of the bill. Lots of statistics that also identify energy efficiency jobs as some really effective, good return on the investment jobs. So this is a big part of the bill as well. And then finally, as everybody on this call or webinar would know, that if you're going to do energy efficiency retrofits, ultimately your utility bills are reduced while you're also helping to create sustainable housing and reach our carbon emission goals. So that's a little bit about that. We just did a bill, a hearing on this bill, Senate Bill 356. So there'll be a whole lot more action to do, a lot of work to get legislators to support this. We'll be having some press conferences. CT Renews will be doing a monthly meeting on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And we're working to get Senator Lopes there to talk about this bill. And to that point, we are also wanting to and intend to be in coalition with the next speakers on the call about an energy bill, an air quality bill, environmental justice bill that we're super excited about, 6551. So that's a little bit of an entree into the next speaker. And part of that is something that we've really been working on called Green Justice Zone, which is prioritizing environmental justice communities, frontline communities in being invested in and prioritized. So again, I'm going to let Alex and Kate, I'm sorry, I can't see your name, but I'm going to let the next speakers talk about that bill as well. And yeah, so happy. Thank you for inviting me, Terry.
Well, thank you so much. Actually, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Hold on
That
a
was
second.
great. IREGen has submitted testimony supporting the energy efficiency bill. We're working to get religious leaders signed on to support it. And I bet I can help you find a religious leader for that press conference, should you want one. And quite frankly,
yes.
Yeah, so, but we'll also be submitting testimony for the PFAS bill next week as well, and HULEC. So we're very interested in all of this. But I will now go to our final two speakers, both from Save the Sound. Kat Fiedler joined Save the Sound in May 2018 as the Peter B. Cooper Legal Fellow. Prior to that, she worked at Pace Law School as the Environmental Law Graduate Research Fellow and as an intern with the Pace Environmental Litigation Clinic. Kat received a JD and certificate in environmental law from Pace Law School in 2017, graduating summa cum laude. At Pace, she served as a research and writing editor of the Pace Environmental Law Review and as a president of the Environmental Law Society. She also received an MEM from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies in 2017, where she was named a WIS Scholar for Conservation in the American West. And she's a member of the New York City Environmental Law Leadership Institute class of 2018. And her dog is super cute, and I'm going to need to know his name by the end of this, but I'm also going to read Alex's bio as well. And Alex is someone that we've been fortunate to have on with some of our events before as well. He actually most recently did a webinar on intersectional environmentalism that we did in September. He is a climate advocate for Save the Sound and is responsible for youth mobilization, supporting climate-related communications, coalition building, community engagement, and legislative advocacy. Prior to joining Save the Sound, Alex served as community organizer to the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, where he planned and executed campaigns relating to climate action, voting rights, and electric school bus advancement. He has also served in roles such as chair of the Public Participation Subcommittee of the Governor's Council on Climate Change and vice chair of Hartford's Advisory Commission on the Environment. In his free time, Alex enjoys spending time with family, reading, singing, and dancing. So welcome, both of you. They're speaking sort of together, so they will be sharing their time.
Thank you, Terry, for having us. I'm going to share my screen now and jump right in. Okay. Today we'll be covering legislation related to environmental justice and climate accountability. And so let's begin. Needless to say, the climate crisis has been further aggravated by COVID-19. It's really shown the barriers and inequities within our system, and so what we plan to dive into today is permitting and how we can empower the state and communities to say no to more harmful pollutants. And so some examples of harmful pollutants include natural gas power plants, trash incinerators, sewage treatment facilities, and landfills. These hazards result in disproportionate rates of higher asthma, in lung cancer, and respiratory illnesses in predominantly communities of color and low-income communities. However, all communities alike are impacted by the climate crisis, and we intend to highlight that. And so one way that environmental inequities were addressed was through the first environmental justice law in 2008. The passing of this law required public participation in permitting approvals from DEP or the Siting Council. This was meant to require that applicants file and receive approval of meaningful public participation and meaningful engagement with communities that they intended to set up a hazardous facility or expand upon a hazardous facility. The applicant was required to consult with local officials to evaluate the need for a community environmental benefit agreement as a way to show that, despite despite the fact that they are setting up something very detrimental to community members' health. They were working to set up a meaningful program to make sure that the community somewhat knew that they cared. And then the last thing to touch on this point is applications may not be acted upon by the agency until at least 60 days after the public meeting. The public process law and community environmental benefit agreement are two things to take away from this. We are aiming to build on this effort. And so this was strengthened somewhat this past year in the September 2020 special session of the legislature. A law was passed to require the applicants of these hazardous sites to actively publicize hearings in environmental justice communities. And so the intention here the intention there was to expand notice requirements and for folks subscribed to DEEP's, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's emails, you can see that they are widely publicizing notices of entities that are looking to establish or expand upon a permit. Another thing to touch on this area is applicants seeking permits in towns with more than 5 sites are designated affecting facilities. They are required to make an agreement with the town in which the owner will agree to lessen the environmental impact of the development. Again, touching on the community environmental benefit agreement, but there is so much more that needs to be done to improve public participation, public notice, and really making sure that the community's health is protected. And so I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Kat, to touch on that.
Thanks, Alex. Can you hear me all right? Okay. So Alex just spoke about the progress we've seen so far with the environmental justice law. And the question is, where do we go from here? So while we've seen this progress over the past few years, it still remains relatively toothless. And I don't mean that in any way to downplay the progress that has been made, because we do have to build from that foundation, and we are seeing that progress over the years. So I'd like to quickly reflect on what the environmental justice law, which is CGS 22A, 20A, doesn't do, so we can point out where we should move in the future and hopefully this session. The law does not currently stop additional pollution. So anyone familiar with the National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA will be familiar with this sort of process limitation. The environmental justice law that Alex was describing is for the most part process only. It requires this public process, meetings, sharing of information, but it doesn't require any specific outcome with the decision. So even if the public process reveals significant public health and environmental harms, there's currently no requirement that a permit be denied, especially if that harm is in environmental justice communities. Permits are approved or denied based on the specific permit requirements, which often include public health and environmental considerations, but they often are not determinative in the permit approval. So we want to see some movement there. And the way the law is, it kind of has the effect of rendering the good public process meaningless, because there's no requirement that it be actually used and acted upon yet. There is, of course, the potential for public pressure and political pressure to build up through those conversations and kind of exposure of information, but that often doesn't work. And along those lines, again, there's no response or incorporation of community input in the application or decision-making yet. So we're working to build off of that. HB 6551, an act concerning environmental air quality, takes a really significant step forward. And I will caveat that with the fact that the proposal that you'll see in the bill is limited compared to a much larger package of amendments to improve the law. And so I'm gonna hit on the next slide, some other improvements that we're gonna be seeking through the hearing process. But I do want to celebrate what's in there because there is some great progress in there. So Section 2 of the law takes the step forward in allowing to stop the permitting of new sources of pollution. DEEP and the Siting Council must reject a permit if there are cumulative environmental and public health impacts in already overburdened communities, or it must eliminate those harms before that permit can move forward. So this finally takes into account that environmental and public health information and harm that will come out through a public process. And it gives the agencies not only the legal support to deny a permit, but it requires them to deny permits when certain considerations and determinations are made. So that's a big step forward. And it is based on a New Jersey law that went into effect last year. It's always good to see kind of progressive change in effect to kind of help legislators who are a bit reluctant to take those giant leaps. It's good to point to someone who's done it before us as much as we want to be leaders ourselves. Section 1 of HB 6551 also establishes an environmental equity working group. This working group will establish criteria to identify disadvantaged communities and identify such communities for the purpose of co-pollutant reductions, greenhouse gas emission reductions. So it's really linked to the climate goals of the state and making sure that the progress made within those goals is prioritized in certain communities. So you get the co-benefits of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing the other environmental harms that come from those facilities that contribute to climate change. So that's also a great thing to see in that bill. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, we still think there's a lot more that can be done, and there'll be more that I'm going to touch on this slide too, to strengthen the environmental justice statute. We have to look big, we have to think big to address the legacy of public health and environmental harm and to stop those new harms from being approved. So we're asking for kind of a suite of amendments to strengthen the environmental justice law in particular. And then there's other proposals, of course, some that you've heard today that land outside of Section 22A, 20A, but also address these same issues. I'm going to go through these very quickly because I know I don't want to take up too much time, but the first category of other amendments we're going to be requesting relate to meaningful public participation and dialogue. So we want the hearing to be a dialogue, a back and forth engagement where concerns are responded to, information is shared so that the decisions can reflect that information. As a part of that, we are seeking a published written response to comments. As it stands now, you could have a public meeting where a community member could speak their concerns and there isn't even a response required. There's no documentation of that concern that's required. So having that documentation is really helpful to share that information, especially with the staff at the agencies that are making those permitting decisions. Continuing to expand the hearing notification methods, there's always room for improvement there, and really thrilled with what we saw in 2020 to strengthen that, but looking to grow that. And then we're also requesting that community involvement be required for negotiations of the community environmental benefit agreement. Right now there's public comment involved in that, but that's public comment on kind of the package of the agreement itself, not on the ground floor, to actually make sure that what's being presented as a final agreement has the community input and not just a municipal official. We're looking to expand definitions in the law to make sure it's comprehensive, not only with what facilities are included, but what communities also have this extra kind of public process built in. And then we're also looking to always, no matter what we're working on, increase accountability measures. So that would include a citizen supervision here, so we can make sure that anyone can enforce the failure to comply with the procedures, and then a fee on those permits to help support environmental justice programs. And then on that, I guess I should, this is very important. There's a hearing on this bill on Monday. So definitely would absolutely love if folks could contribute testimony to support this legislation. Thanks. And back to Alex.
We saw this as an opportunity to really increase climate accountability. Our organization had submitted language to the Environment Committee on measures that could be taken to address the climate crisis and hold state leaders accountable to the goals that it had established in the Global Warming Solutions Act Those goals being 45% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030 and 80% greenhouse gas reduction by 2050. What we're looking for is transparent reporting from DEP and other state agencies on how we're achieving these targets, because there is some skepticism right now on if we're really achieving those targets due to interests such as the Killingly gas plant proposal that would take our state in a backwards direction with regard to the climate crisis. We want to make sure that all state authorities consider whether incoming permit applications or licenses from hazardous facilities don't contradict the greenhouse gas emissions targets that we are aiming for, because we need to protect public health, we need to protect our lands, we need to protect our communities. And so one thing that we are striving for as an amendment as well to this bill was a climate change impact note requirement, which would mean that each piece of legislation in the legislature would have a note addressing its climate change impact as of February 2022. And I'm going to pass it back to Kat for sewage right to know.
All right, thanks, Alex. So slight pivot to some water specific issues. I wanted to speak briefly on the sewage right to know law and our continued progress there. As many of you probably know, unfortunately, that Connecticut is plagued with old and poorly maintained sewage collection systems, and these systems are often unable to keep up with growing capacity needs. At the same time, we're experiencing larger storm events, so the stormwater can overwhelm these sewage systems as well, all resulting in millions of gallons of raw sewage pouring into our local waterways each year. So that's an issue that Save the Sound and many of our partners, many who are on this webinar today, are working hard to eliminate. But in the meantime, it's really important that Connecticut residents, everyone, is informed when threats to public health and the environment result from these spills, so that they can make informed decisions as to when and where they can safely swim, fish, or just use water resources in any other way. And these spills can impact environmental justice communities more than others, especially when we all do not have the same access to water resources or alternative sites. If there's a spill in my local waterway, sometimes that means that you'll have to travel farther to go somewhere that's safe. Broad notice is needed in different languages to make sure that that information is shared effectively. And subsistence fisheries can also be impacted by the environmental harms and threats that are caused by the sewage spills. So the current sewage right to know law, which is really been transformative in terms of public information, requires reporting of sewage spills and the publication of those reports on DEEP's website. But there's, again, room for improvement there too. If anyone's tried to dig through those reports, it takes a little bit of sleuthing on the DEEP's website and clicking through some very large spreadsheets. So it's not very functional for you if you're gonna, wake up in the morning and decide where you're gonna go fishing or swimming. It's not something that's easy to build into your kind of information stream to make decisions every day. So the amendments in the sewage right to know law this year, SB 927, would require the development of a real-time push notification system where that information is sent out to people who have signed up with the system. They receive that information promptly and they can make decisions accordingly and be safe when the sewage is in our waterways. It also expands requirements of what must be reported to the public. And we're making sure that all those notifications are multilingual and accessible to as many citizens of the state as possible. The public hearing for this bill was yesterday, and I'm happy to report that we have consensus language with DEEP. So DEEP will not be, harming us or slowing us down here. So we expect that this will move through. And I definitely just want to flag this for folks on this webinar to watch out for any requests for support as we continue to see it move forward, and certainly to watch out in the future for any education that comes out of this to make sure that people know how to access the push notification system that will be coming out of this. And definitely a shout out to Lou, because he's been through the thick of it from the very beginning on the Sewage Right to Know law, and we couldn't be where we are for this really great step forward without him. All right.
Couldn't have made this progress without you, Kat.
Well,
So
thanks, Lou.
right back at you.
And so in conclusion, as Kat had mentioned earlier, on Monday, the act concerning environmental air quality will have a public hearing on Monday in the Environment Committee. The Environment Committee will also be addressing transportation and adaptation related bills as well. So I encourage everyone to join our activist network. Please sign up for our alerts. I am setting one up tomorrow to provide everyone in our base sample language to make sure that we have a robust community power for the act concerning environmental air quality. And I have also provided Kat and my emails for your reference. And thank you, IREJN, for hosting.
Oh, you are welcome. I'm so glad. Thank you to all of our speakers. That was super informative. We now have about 30 minutes for questions. And so you can put, if you have a question, guys, put them in the chat. I know that I saw someone saying, okay, so here we go. The first question that I saw was for Ann Hulick. This person says, how can we control packaging when it's not produced in Connecticut? And is chlorine-free foam cheaper?
So yes, that's a really good question. And many types of chlorine products are cheaper, but what we can do is restrict the sale, manufacture, and distribution of PFAS containing packaging in the state. And that's the approach that many other states have taken. New York, Washington State, California, et cetera. So that is not only protecting the residents of Connecticut, it's also sending a very powerful statement to the manufacturers in the market that states do not want toxic packaging. And so there's a really powerful effect to that. So we do have the ability, and that is part of the language in the bill. So we can absolutely do that.
And so you think the hearing for that food packaging bill might be next week?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up next week. So again, it's not just food packaging, it's now expanded to all packaging.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. And you know, frankly, that is because that's what DEEP wanted. DEEP has been working on a multi-state interstate compact on packaging, on all packaging. So I was very pleasantly surprised that they wanted to expand it beyond food packaging to all packaging. And so we'll see. That's what we're going to fall back. Will be a compromise down to just food packaging for this year. But either way, it's a big step forward to protect health, the environment, our waters, and EJ communities.
I agree. And Janet, actually, so Janet just followed up. She said, I hate to sound naive, but how do you actually check on the multitudes of types of packaging? We need a federal law. Which is, I mean, it's funny. We can actually, let me just actually say something, is that we definitely need a federal law, but watching the federal government try to do anything is really sort of, to me, always brings it home that, no, we got to do it here. They're never going to get it. I mean, it takes them forever to get anything done. We actually have a lot of opportunities here. So, but Anne, how
yes.
how do they?
Couldn't agree. No, That's exactly right, Terry. And, you know, states are the laboratories of democracy, and it's incumbent on states to take action. And frankly, many of us, Lou and Alex and Kat and Ann, we're all coordinating with our federal delegations, and we are constantly aware that what we do at the state level helps to drive federal policy. So it's really important for states to take action, because that then not only helps shift the marketplace, but it builds momentum for broader federal policy. So I can't say it strongly enough. We need to act, even though we're a small state. This is really important.
Well, and just to that point, actually, the action of small groups, that's how the statewide fracking waste ban got finally
That's
passed,
right.
was that it had gone on town by town basis. Finally, 56 towns had passed bans on fracking waste, and I remember one of the representatives getting up and saying, "This is a little embarrassing. You know, we're supposed to be protecting these people, and they're out there protecting themselves town by town." So, you know,
That's
yeah,
right.
exactly. If we do things at the state level, it does push the federal government.
And it pushes the marketplace. That's right.
Oh, this is another question for Anne. PFAS chemicals are no longer produced in the US. This is from Dean. Is the ultimate solution to prohibit imports of the chemicals and the products that contain them?
So there's always confusion about this. So there's again 9,000 variations of these PFAS, the class of these chemicals. Most of them are produced in the United States and across the globe. 2, which is PFOA and PFOS, those were 2 original of these fluorine carbon compounds. Those are no longer produced here, but they are found in imported products. So it is really incumbent on states to pass these kinds of laws, because it's sending, you know, again, strong signals that we do not want these toxic chemicals in products. And we want to restrict, we want to turn off the tap. That's how we like to say it. We want to turn off the tap of having these toxic legacy pollutants impacting our health and our environment. So this is one way that we can do it.
Thank you. I actually have a question for Lou. And folks, if you have questions, just drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'm watching. And so we'll get to them. But Lou, I must have been doing, I think I was doing like administrative things, like, you know, making it go live on Facebook and stuff like that. Can you just remind, where is the bottle bill? Like, where's the next hearing or next committee it's going in front of?
We don't have a bill number just yet.
Oh, we don't. Okay,
The
maybe.
bottle bill, we understand. So actually, was texting with Senator Cohen on this subject today. It sounds like they were working on language today. And I'm hopefully and cautiously optimistic that it sounds like they're working with the language that our coalition has submitted on the bottle bill, which will do a number of things. It's based off of what we've been organizing around for the last several years. We kind of call it the trifecta, or the 3-legged stool, if you will, of updating the handling fee on each container that's recycled, raising the deposit from 5 to 10 cents on each container, and expanding the universe of beverage containers that are included under the program. Currently, juices, teas, sports drinks, wine, and liquor are not included in our bottle bill. This bill would expand the program to include those non-carbonated beverages and put a timeline in place to bring wine and liquor into the program by 2026, which is a little bit of a ways out. It's by no means what we all in the coalition would like to see, but this is, the legislative process depends on stakeholders' ability to compromise and work together to find an acceptable path forward. And so the bill has not come out. Once again, we expect that it's going to be part of a bill called an Act Concerning Solid Waste Management in our state, which was introduced in committee 2 weeks ago. And once we do have a bill number, I will let you know that, and you can share that with your members, because we'll definitely be encouraging folks to reach out and submit testimony on that bill as well.
Great. It's funny. So folks that are listening, I did an environmental racism forum at this point, I guess 2 years ago. And when I asked Sharon Lewis what one of the major environmental justice issues was, she said plastic pollution. And I'd been thinking along the lines of air pollution and she said, no, it's because it's where the plastic is created and then where it is disposed of is a huge environmental justice issue. So I really hope that we can get this bill through. And so let me see if there are any more questions in the here. Oh, no open questions right now. All right. So actually, the composting bill, has that already been in a hearing, or does that have a hearing scheduled?
I guess I'll take a stab at answering that. I think we think it's going to be in the same bill. A lot of what they're doing right now is these kind of catch-all legislative packages. And my sense from talking to committee leadership is that the food waste piece will also be in that Act Concerning Solid Waste Management.
And so okay. But that's not
a guarantee. I'm not a legislator. I'm not in the room, obviously, when these type of decisions are being made, but that's the sense that we're getting.
Well, and just for folks, I sat in on something where I think it was the League of Conservation Voters, their environmental summit, and Speaker Ritter had said that was a big possibility, that there would be more of these sort of catch-all bills because COVID was limiting ability. So they were going to maybe packaging things together. So
just a thought on that. That is the trend that we've been seeing. They've been doing more of these kind of, we refer to them sometimes as aircraft carrier, because they just kind of it carries any number of different concept bills. And there are advantages to this, but there are also some really significant disadvantages to this. One of the advantages being that it gives us an opportunity to get some priorities across the finish line that we've been working on for a number of years, that for one reason or another we haven't been able to get to pass these bills. And very often they put together these big legislative packages because these are priorities that the various committee chairs really want to get done. And so in that respect, it's good. These things are in some ways too big to fail, right? At the same time, it also creates lots of opportunities for mischief. And legislators can get all different kinds of amendments filed on these bills. And once again, too big to fail. If an amendment gets passed on a bill like that, there's sometimes very, very little opportunity to derail or to make changes and that kind of thing. So it can be a real challenge. And that's one of the reasons I think why it's so important that members of the public, voters are, informed about these type of things, but also, holding their legislators accountable and reaching out to them consistently and saying, this is what we support. These are the changes that need to happen, and this is why. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Lou, if I could jump in quickly on that comment you just made, I think with this model this year, it's going to be easier for us to miss some of the environmental rollbacks because they will be tacked on. We won't have an entire bill related to a rollback. So just kind of along those same lines, I think it's worth being really vigilant, and whether you are the one reading that legislation or you follow groups that are doing that work for you, just keep an eye on that. It's going to be harder to spot It's always an issue late in session, of course, but I think we're going to see much, much more of that with these bigger packages.
Right. Lou, actually, just to follow up on the bottle bill, Marjorie asked, what is the impact of the bottle bill on the reduction of the trash stream?
Very challenging to give a concrete answer to that question. I will share with you that the projection is that by expanding the bottle bill to include non-carbonated beverages, wine and liquor, and by increasing the deposit from 5 to 10 cents, we could increase recycling in Connecticut by upwards of 400 million containers a year. So that's pretty significant. And getting those materials out of the waste stream, is a direct benefit to municipalities and to taxpayers there. We estimate that currently the bottle bill saves municipalities about $2 million a year in recycling costs. And those numbers are projected to go up as more containers are brought into the system. You're also getting, you'll also be getting some containers, not just out of the blue bin, but also out of the solid waste stream. And that means fewer plastic containers going to incinerators, which also, produces harmful air and water pollution that affect our health.
Absolutely. Diane said, thank you, Terry, Ira, Jen, and speakers for a great discussion. She said, relating to Monday's HB 6551 public hearing, which is the environmental justice law, environmental quality, air quality. She said, where can we find talking points? And she was wondering if tonight's participants commenting on that particular law ask that the creation of an environmental equity working group include as many local people as possible that are actually burdened by urban and rural air quality problems as members.
Yes, Kat and I just worked on a fact sheet that we sent out to many of our partners, and we will be posting all of our talking points in a PDF to our webpage tomorrow, and I will also be sending it in an action alert to our members. So please make sure you're signed up for our action alerts. Please keep an eye out for that. And then to Diane's second question, her and I were just on a call today about equity, what an equity advisory body would mean for the transportation climate initiative discussions that are going on. And I wholeheartedly agree that there needs to be strong language that addresses folks being represented in the equity advisory body from the most overburdened and underserved communities. I wholeheartedly agree. And so I think our first step is getting this legislation passed on Monday, because the climate crisis, I feel like we're getting to a peak right now, and stopping additional hazards in this language that we've put forward is so important. And we really need to make sure that the climate accountability pieces are strong too. Many folks have heard today that there is a new chair and vice chair on the House side of the Environment Committee, Representative Gresco as chair, and vice chair being Representative Palm, climate champions, environmental champions. Very hopeful about our ability to work with them. And so please stay in tune with our action alerts.
So that hearing is Monday. And just for those of you who, for the advocates, just for the folks at home, once there is a hearing, how long does it usually take for the committee to actually vote? So you submitted your testimony and then you sort of like sit around waiting. So how long does it usually take for committees to vote? And could they just sit on it forever and just let it die and never vote?
Yep.
Okay.
The answer to that last question is yes. I actually don't know when the JF deadline is this year. Lou, you probably have that kind of lodged into your brain forever, don't you?
I want to say it's
Yeah.
the end of, is it the end of March? Or
Yes, it's the end of,
Yeah.
I don't have the exact date in the top
Yeah.
of my head, but
It's worth, so what we do is we'll track any committee meeting that comes after the hearing to see what's on the agenda for them to vote on
Yeah.
to JF the bill. I'm not aware of when those meetings are next week, but they have been doing that fairly promptly after the hearings this session to keep things moving through.
Mhm.
So for all we know, it could be voted on next week. We're certainly working to get that amendment
Mhm.
language into the hands of whoever needs it as soon as possible, including probably tomorrow with some correspondence. And I know we have Representative Michelle on this webinar as well, who's been really helping us move on the additional whole host of improvements that we still want to move forward. Yeah, Lou, did you find that date or, okay.
I don't have it, not off the top of my head.
But I would just say, don't be discouraged. I think the bills that we've talked about tonight, like what Alex brought up and Kat, the EJ bills, and I think these are high priority items. I can't imagine that the committees would sit on them and not, vote. I think we will see votes. So stay tuned. I think it's important for us to be very vigilant and, again, like Lou said earlier, reaching out to our legislators now and say, hey, we support this. We support these priorities. And I do want to put a thank you note to Representative Michelle because he's on the meeting tonight and he's been on numerous of these meetings and he's a real ally for so many of our issues. So reach out to supportive legislators and say thank you. And, can you help us move these forward?
Absolutely. And so one of the reasons I organize these events is that a lot of times we all start the legislative session with a lot of energy, and then we hear about the bills going to committee, and we contact our legislators, and we write our testimony, and it gets passed out of the committee, and everyone celebrates because they think like, woohoo, this is great, we had a victory. And then it doesn't move very much farther than that. And so part of the reason I wanted to put this together was to let people know what was happening with different legislation, and also to let you know that this is a bit of a marathon. A lot of bills will go through more than one committee. They need, testimony needs to be submitted to each committee for the hearing. They get voted on, and then they get introduced in the House and then the Senate, and then it has to go to the governor's desk. So there are many opportunities where we're going to need to keep pushing these bills forward, and they're all important. And fortunately, when I was listening to Speaker Ritter's talk at the summit, he seemed very energized about a lot of these priorities. So that was very encouraging. But we also have to be realistic in that it's an exhausting year and they've got a lot of things on their plate. And so we just need to keep reminding them and urging them and contacting them and that sort of thing, and adding our support to these legislative pieces that they're looking at, so that they will think of us when they're wondering what they should vote for.
Yes.
So are there, I see another question popping in. Will speaker slides be made available to us? I am recording this. It will be on our YouTube channel. IREJN has a YouTube channel. We've got some videos up there now, so you can check them out. So this will be up. I'll put it up this evening, especially since this is so time sensitive. I want people to be able to, check it out pretty immediately. It was also going live on Facebook this whole time, so we got some eyes on it that way. And yeah, so I will send the link for our YouTube out to everyone after this. So, and actually, I'm going to share my screen and just tell you about our next webinar is called Religious Communities in the Planetary Crisis, and it's featuring national leaders from the Muslim, Hindu, Christian, and Jewish perspective, talking about the critical role that the religious communities and faith traditions have in addressing this crisis facing our planet. So it'll be Thursday, April 8th from 7 to 8:30. We're very excited about it. We've got the speakers are going to be amazing. And I will also send out a link to that to register when I follow up with the video for this. So if you're on this, you will also get a link to register for that if you would like to attend it as well. So, but Thursday, April 8th, mark your calendars. So let's see here. I just want to make sure. I think Representative Michelle just said, thank you. I'll also work on my colleagues. Also, if you reach out to your own legislators, do not hesitate to ask them if they can get fellow legislators to also support.
Oh,
That's very true. They
great
listen to each
advice.
other.
Yep, great
Yeah.
advice. Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be
Can't
shy.
be shy, right? We just ask and
Absolutely. Oh, I
Yeah.
have to say, my representative
Yep.
finally voted, to ban fracking waste. I'd contacted him about so many things, and he hadn't really, come through for me. But he finally voted to ban fracking waste. He's like the second to last vote yes, but he did it. So I thanked him the next day.
it's
So,
good.
does anyone have anything else before we finish up? Any last little comments that our panelists want to make?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground here today. I just
Sure
really
did.
want to express my appreciation to you and all of your members and this, this whole community that you've really brought together is very active and very enthusiastic about the issues, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. So really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. I mean, honestly, thank you to all of our panelists. The legislative session is an exhausting time, and I'm grateful that you took your evening out to talk to folks and let them know what they can do. And for anyone who is attending this, I will be, emailing you out with action items as they come across my plate. I'm going to let you know what committee's hearing what, when the votes are and what you can do. So I hope that you will definitely take action.
Thank you so much, Terry, for your leadership. And I would echo Lou's comments that it's really great that you bring all of us together and all of the faith community together. It's really, it's wonderful and a wonderful feeling that we're all working together on these issues.
Awesome. It's good to be with you.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
good
Have a
night.
great day.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone.
Thank
Take care.
you.